Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to welcome Ali Hussain, CEO and co-founder at Tabs. Ali, welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Ben. Always a privilege to be on your show, and it's great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, excited for this because we talked, I think it was maybe last year, a year ago. So now a lot has happened in the market, the finance market, especially the CFO tech stack. But for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an operator most of my career, actually more on the COO finance side, and so have spent most of my life in company building, thinking about enterprise applications, cloud, ERP, CRM, and generally around the time of GPT launching in 2022, got very fixated with how that was going to reimagine the ERP side of finance, and have had the privilege to just be building with a ton of great product and engineering and accounting minds to think about how this all gets reimagined in the post LLM world.
Yeah, and is Tabs your second project startup, third? Where are you in as
And
far as
the first
company
time I
building?
founded, gotten this CEO role. I've been
Mhm.
a CEO before. Last company was a company called Latch. I was COO there, and prior to that was in the advisory consulting side of the world.
Okay. And then, yeah, let's talk Tabs. Tell us a little bit what the products and services that Tabs offers.
Yeah, ultimately, we're focused when we think, Ben, around operational finance. We ultimately think the core areas around the ERP are everything tied to vendor, AP spend, procurement, everything tied to employee, payroll benefits, and everything tied to customer or commercials, which is what we would call everything tied to revenue. And so we are building around that commercial data primitive versus the vendor or employee side. And we think uniquely the future of both AI and agents and products are creating specializations around the finance stack, because that's the best way you can really emulate the domain expertise around that data primitive. And so what Tabs is it's a modern AI platform and agents that automate all things around that customer. And so that is mostly revenue related. So everything tied to your order to cash or billing, which goes down to the collections cash app level. But because we have that data context, we can do everything related to 606 and RevRec and GAAP. And then also the non-GAAP parts of the insights that finance leaders need, whether it's SaaS metrics like ARR, MRR, CAR, but also down to insights around days to pay, cash forecasting, all on the non-GAAP side. And so that is the platform we have built and the place we are going to continue to double down in the coming years.
And I know last time I asked you, like, what kind of software category do you call this? Because I'd call it, generally subscription management. I know it's more, it's more than that. And maybe it's hard to say just a certain category, but you, how would you define the software category?
Yeah, I think we're headed in calling it revenue automation. And
Hmm.
not just us. I think for a time it's been the SaaS side. Some have called it quote to cash. Some have called it just billing and collections or dunning automation. There's an entire category of RevRec products. I think the simple category for finance will ultimately be called revenue automation. It's
Hmm.
now, I mean, the elephant, the gorilla in the room, Stripe Billing, their entire suite of products are under revenue automation. We have seen newer entrants kind of emulate our terminology here. And so I am of the opinion that if you're looking for a holistic solution from the minute a deal is closed won, which we think is when finance really takes over, quoting really ultimately finance should be involved, but sits within the revenue operations and sales side of the house. And we think when you muddy those two, it creates a ton of fatigue between the two teams. And so everything from closed won, taking the order and contract cycle or the customer cycle to renewal is, and with all of the revenue compliance, recognition, audit, that for us all fits into this revenue automation bucket.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big landscape. In last time we talked about your focus, and it looked like a B2B focus, mid-market to enterprise companies. So has your focus changed as far as your ICP since the last time we talked?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much in line. I think B2B is the area where there's the most excitement in the market. I think over the last couple of years, we saw a lot of PLG, simple subscription products, whether it was the ChargeBees of the world, the Stripes of the world, the Recurlays. We think the customer has a decent amount of options there, And frankly, it's tough to compete with Stripe that's now has an enterprise value of $110 billion and will be able to put efforts in there, whether they build or buy at a next level. And so we are hyper focused on the parts of B2B that we actually think is a bigger part of the market, which is the sales led order form contract part of B2B. Even companies that do both, most of the true hyperscale ultimately happens at the sales led motion. That's where the largest ACVs are, the higher meatier contracts, the higher margin deals with less churn and longer lifetime value. And so B2B sales led is what we are most excited about. In that, I would say we're probably right in the middle of what I would call either early mid market or core mid market. And so on the very low end, companies that are starting to hit their first 7, 8 figures of revenue, but really the sweet spot is 20 to half a billion. That is where we think the market is most ripe for AI and also fastest to adopt this type of technology at the pace we need to grow.
And then I talk to a lot of companies, say B2B space, and they start like within one vertical. So maybe they are just after tech companies.
Yeah.
And then it makes sense. All right, we got that. Now we expand from there. But any certain verticals that you're after, or could a manufacturer come on or a tech company? Tell us a little bit about the vertical focus.
I would describe it as anyone that has complex kind of commercials. So whether it's
Mhm.
complex contracts, order forms, things that are hyper negotiated and particularly have some form of usage tend to be a great fit for us. So we like the complex stuff. And the reason for that is we think that's just how business is going to be done in the future. Like all companies today already are calling themselves AI companies, but 5 years from now, whether you're John Deere or Jiffy Lube or Cursor and Perplexity, you're all going to be AI companies. And so we're bullish on complexity as an opportunity for revenue growth. That said, to just answer your question very explicitly, today, a decent amount, I'd say at least about half are some form of technology or AI company. But where we are seeing significant growth is the professional market space. You take your mid-market consulting firm, you take your professional service company, they have very marketing firm, complex commercials that are often negotiated at the client type. At the client side, you have milestone based or usage or seat based billing, even in those type of businesses that we're excited to also continue to support as a part of this next phase.
In talking AI, and I am looking forward to a couple years down the road, whenever it might be, where we no longer say we're AI first or AI native. Right? It's just going to be assumed, right? We're
Yeah.
using AI in our technology. And where do we stand with CFOs in the back office
Yeah.
and AI hype? There's so many different reports of, tons of CFOs are adopting it. Then you see when I go to events and I ask CFOs, raise your hand if you're really using AI in the back office, and no one raises their hand really. So and of course you're talking to a lot of controller CFOs. Where are we with AI in the back office and helping out finance and accounting?
Yeah, we're yet to hit kind of it being the baseline operanda of most CFOs, but I think we are exiting the early adopter phase and moving to the fast follower. And what I mean by that is I think the shift in demand we have seen coming into January of this year, and certainly we're now almost 10 months into that, has been a drastic change. Like when you and I chatted probably 10 months ago or 11 months ago, there was some curiosity, but outside of early adopters who were bolder or very tech forward, there's a broader hesitancy. Why would I load my contracts into an LM or into tabs? Or why would I trust tabs to be able to parse out information that I require a accountant to do? That whole shift has been remarkable, starting, I would say, as early as the spring of this year, but has really proliferated through the summer. Like, I think the types of customers, personas we're seeing, types of stack like they used to use prior to using something like a tabs demonstrates a complete shift in openness to starting to change the way they think about AI. That said, I think the folks that are willing to go AI everything is still a smaller group. I think the best operators of some of the best companies are starting to figure out how they move away from, oh, like my team uses OpenAI or Anthropic to, hey, I want to start making a couple vertical bets in my stack, I may still use NetSuite at the core or Intact at the core, but using some AI solution like a Tabs or what I'm seeing with some of the new products from Ramp or others is starting to allow me to augment AI in my stack to kind of see where this thing goes over the next couple of years.
And it's essentially the space, and revenue automation, I think it's just a hot space right now,
Yeah.
which makes sense, right? We've got to invoice our customers accurately, do RevRec, all the metrics reporting, and the ERP space changing too,
Yeah.
where in my tech stack survey, year in year out for 6 years, QuickBooks, Xero, Sage, NetSuite. Now we've got some big change in the ERP space, tons of fundraising events
Yeah.
on the ERP. So how do you view revenue automation, ERP that may want to do a better job on revenue automation than some of these incumbents? Like, kind of where do you just two silos still, or are we going to see some overlap in what people are trying to do?
I think we're going to see overlap. The difference between 10 years ago when the everything ERP came out, and I was one of those buyers in
Mhm.
15, I bought NetSuite before Oracle bought NetSuite, and the sale made a ton of sense, which is you are buying on-prem ERPs. We are going to be your cloud-based provider, and we're going to provide you modern modularization around the entire suite that we will give to you. And here's going to be a set of service providers that will help augment that suite for your business model. Was a very modern concept in 2014, 15. I think what has shifted is the buyer has dictated and said, look, these are very specialized domains within my financial operations. Revenue is very different than AP, which is very different than my reconciliation or my FP&A or my payroll. That said, I don't need 16 different vendors, but I'm getting more comfortable with a concept of best of breed. I need best of breed at the GL level. I really like Zip for procurement, so I really like Intact's GL. I love Zip's AP. I love Gusto's payroll and benefits. And I love Tabs's order to cash and RevRec. And what I'm seeing, and I think the legacy players have been a little uncomfortable with that because they were so embedded in this suite. I think that has to change. If I'm my friends at Oracle or my friends at Intact, like as great as it is to own all of the revenue in the sale, you have lost that in AP and spend. And what you tried to latch onto pre-COVID has now completely left to Coupa, Zip, Ramp, Brex, and many others. You must augment that and change the way you think about that on revenue automation, or the same thing is about to happen. To answer your question though, Ben, I think the modern ERP players, which show up in your survey, and I've gotten to know all of the CEOs of that, whether you take a Rillet or a Campfire or all these other great solutions, what's changed is I think they've been more collaborative and said, look, this is a hard problem. We are going to be building as fast as possible, but we can do it better together with a Tabs and a Ramp and a Rippling versus us trying to build everything and lose the foundation of what we own, which is the GL at the center. And if we can get the amazing hydration from a Tabs and a Ramp, we can focus our efforts to really build the best GL for the customer that needs it. And so the partnership from the new age players has been incredible. And we're starting to see that open up with the legacy players too. So that's kind of my consensus and state of the union of the differences happening. But I'm very optimistic that the future of all of this is going to be great for the customer because they're going to have better options than ever before. But also, I think we have to move to a more collaborative world because it's the only way anyone's going to survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Yeah, a lot of activity in the ERP space, and those right? As they build out, are they destined to become a large ERP with a lot of landscape? And you're back to the same position, but like you said, maybe it's a different approach today. And I know last time when we spoke, and I think you were kind of integration agnostic, or just, you could upload PDFs, contracts. Tell us, is that still the same play? Do you integrate, or is it still kind of you're disconnected and the source of revenue data can come from anywhere?
It can still come from anywhere, but we're hyper focused and very advanced now from a workflow standpoint. So at the end of the day, we want to work where you work. And the reality is the way finance gets data is from their friends in sales. And so when you think about the workflow between, I always remember in middle school how a bill gets made. That was one of my favorite videos.
I remember.
And how an order form or a contract gets made, it's in the sales side of the house in your CRM or with your PDF and your legal team. Sales is working within HubSpot or Salesforce. They send that order form out in DocuSign or Panda Docs. In order for them to get deal credit, they have to close one it in their sales CRM. And so though we still believe the best context for finance is to trust the actual contract or order form, we have built out significant integration so that we can communicate with Salesforce and HubSpot and know when sales has authorized it as truly closed won to basically pass it on, that bill, to the next House of Representatives, which is finance. And so the automation and experience is system to system, but it is still AI foundational to make sure that the data gets audited and translated in unstructured to structured form so that finance ultimately is getting and receiving the source of truth to ensure there's accuracy, to ensure it's actually following what the end customer agreed to, but so that they can pull out a lot more rich context that can then influence things like a renewal escalator or rev rec that pulls out things beyond billing terms so that other parts of the revenue journey that may not sit in sales CRM can both be inherited and understood on the other side of the app.
Yeah, well, CFO is definitely benefiting today from the new tech, which I love, a lot easier than years ago. Let's talk a few stats and figures, which I think the same. Founded early 2023, based in New York, correct?
100%.
And then what's your current team size?
Yeah, so we're 100% in New York. We're just over 100 people as of this week, all FTE. We're roughly half product and engineering. And so I truly mean this, like, as to your point in the beginning, Lynn, and Ben, I know you've thought a lot about revenue over the years. It's really hard. Like, even in the world of AI, you can't this is not something you just lovable or a cursor or replet a quick app. Like, there's a lot of foundational data moats you have to build. So on the integration side, you have to integrate with CRM, with ERP, with tax, with payments. We talked about this earlier, usage, like how do you get in Snowflake and Looker? And so there's very hard API and data disciplines that need to get built out. There's incredibly difficult operational software, like no AI is going to do SSP or proration or multi-entity. These are all things we must still build out in 2025. And then on top of that, we must reimagine the category. And so a big part of this fundraise was agents. And so we broadly believe we are assembling the best technology team in all of finance. We are fortunate to put that all behind the revenue problem because we think it's the one that's been the most forgotten when you look at the R&D that went into AP, spend, payroll over the last 5 years. We're just taking all of that horsepower and that we've been able to build up since the last fundraise and pointing it against the revenue problem.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking fundraising in that journey because when we last talked, you're about 50 or so now, just hitting 100. And last time, grown fast, hundreds of customers. I assume still maybe hundreds and still growing there as far as sense of scale with the company.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And then tell us, go to market. So we last talked with your Series A, and last time, outbound networking, talking to partner channels like, outsourced FP&A, CFO bookkeeping. So go to market has changed at all, or still about the same go to market strategy since last time?
Yeah, I think there's been 2 other expansions in the principle. So direct is still a big part of this business. It is what every great finance software has had to do in the beginning to both ensure they understand the customer, build the product fast, but also get the word out there. The second channel that has been huge for us is the accountant channel. So we've been
Mhm.
fortunate to be one of CPA.com's accelerator companies in 2025. But within that, some of the best CAS practices throughout both Silicon Valley, but also I was with Armanino last week talking to the heads of Weiss. I'll be at Baker Tilly in 2 weeks in Boston. Like we're seeing significant shift in how the accounting firms are thinking about this problem and providing great services and value added services to their clients. And so that's been a big growth area for us. I think almost a third of our net new accounts in the last 90 days came from the cast side of the house. And then to the point earlier, like the level of collaboration happening amongst the new players is excellent. Like we share leads with all the tax providers. I have all the AI tax providers, all four CEOs. We text and we trade notes, all of the new ERP providers, even the FP&A players. And so it's just an exciting time for product technology partnerships right now that are beyond just like a LinkedIn post or a website vector. Like there's deep collaboration happening right now so that we can best support and provide the best solution to our mutual clients.
And then, so a lot of money going into the space, going into the ERP space. So tell us, Series B raised, looks like 55 million, correct? Okay. And then how much have you raised to date now?
I think we're just around the $100 million mark, like it's somewhere between 90 to 100, but we're we've been fortunate to get the resources to go really do a great to really like go win the category.
And so, right, seed, Series A, now Series B.
Yep.
And then tell us, I always love to know, like, expectations from investors as you scale from Series A to now Series B. Like, what are the big talking points in those fundraising discussions when you're at the Series B level?
Yeah. I think it's a lot of it is just doing what you said, meaning you saw a prior round, you were given a set of amount of capital. There were certain things that you presented to your investors that were very important, whether it's revenue growth, team, product, market, and kind of fast forwarding several quarters and board meetings and saying, look, like we are on the right trajectory. And the market is telling us this is the right trajectory and there's more we could do with more. And so I'd say that's the overall piece specifically for us. I'd say from a market standpoint, I think the the verdict is out that the finance stack or the ERP category broadly, which includes all of these solutions, is one of the largest in all of enterprise applications, if not the largest. If you look at how much is spent in all of the ERP modules and the ERP, it is larger than on an annual basis, almost the market caps of Salesforce and HubSpot. So it's not even close on how much is spent here versus CRM. It is on par, if not larger, than what is spent in cloud. And so I think the investors have realized this is like not only potentially the most exciting area for vertical AI, it is ripe for disruption given the lack of dollars that went in innovation because people had kind of written it off to Oracle and Workday and others. And so I think that has definitely helped in the change in sentiment this year. The other fundamentals are just you must grow top line and revenue. You must demonstrate an excellent product. You must demonstrate that you are starting to pull in operational rigor in terms of how the customer goes through their customer journey through onboarding and customer success. You must demonstrate healthy and strong NDR, and you must start to demonstrate a path to healthy gross margin as a AI company. And I think if you can nail that, it the opportunities for other founders and builders in the space is generational right now.
And is it fair to say, so maybe Series A still showing some product market fit, but feel pretty good there. But when you say Series B, all right, we're beyond the product market fit stage. We know there's a market. We know we have traction. And now is it about scaling up, building out the product landscape?
I think that's right. I think the product market fit question. Now, there's always advancements in product,
Okay.
full gaps. If you take a broad-based problem like revenue, there's a lot, and we're only getting started. That said, a great signal. Like when you and I chatted, I was probably on 80% of sales calls and deals. In Q1 of this year, 80% of deals got done without me even knowing about them. Obviously, I got to come later on in the process, meet the customer and pitch my case. But for the most part, AEs or partners or others can drive a deal without it having so much key person risk. And I think when you find that repeatability, that becomes a really big delta between the earlier Series A and when you may be ready for the next grade in high school.
Yeah, and I love that proxy because that's probably the first time that's come up. We know founder-led sales, right? You hire out the team, but now from Series A to Series B, you're mostly a lot of those calls Series A at that stage, and now Series B. Yep, we've got a
Yeah.
sales team. They're handling that. And I know looking back at my notes, Series A metrics, you talked about demonstrating strong pipeline demand, repeatable playbook, looking at ARR, CAR, and now would you say Series B metrics sounds like now some gross margin focus, NDR focus, any other focus with Series B
No,
that they
starts to come in like, hey, you're hiring AEs. Like if you have dollars, you can hire AEs, but can they hit quota? Like,
Mhm.
does it take them to ramp? How do you produce a lead? How much does it cost to produce a lead? What is your LTV to CAC? What are some of your other efficiency metrics? Like, I think a lot of the things, Ben, you've been preaching for the last several years, just because you're an AI company doesn't mean they go away. They, in fact, have unique ways you have to think about them because, in some ways, AI can be expensive from a COG standpoint. In some ways, AI can create new opportunities on things like customer support or customer success or implementation. And so the fundamentals, I think, are almost the same from a KPI standpoint, but the double click of what you must do as a vertical AI company change quite a bit because of the different tools you have. And it's for better or for worse. I mean, there are more product-led growth AI companies, often outside of the finance stack, but in things like coding, et cetera, that are with very lean teams driving significant revenue, but they have different opportunities and challenges such as gross margin and things like that. And so I would say the things you've been preaching for the last 5 years have never been more true in SaaS to vertical AI. It's just the way you take on those problems are getting stressed in new types of ways.
And one last question around this is so margins, right? There's a lot of talk around margins with AI companies and hey, we'll never be at 80% or 70%. But then I talked to some founders who say their investors still expect eventually 70, 80% margins, just like SaaS. So where are we with this? I know a lot of different opinions, but where, at least how you're managing the company,
Yeah.
how do you think about the margin profile?
Yeah. I think we are thinking about where can we use the technologies we have today to keep the margin profile healthy. That said, we are very bullish on where new opportunities will come up in more automation. And it's a constant balance of how do you prioritize building for that in the present moment, knowing that certain technologies or even other vendors to support that are only getting better in the next 24, 36 months versus how you can pour that R&D and effort into building the best products for your customers. I still take the view that so long as you have an eye on it and you are building, like you're taking steps in the right direction, we must prioritize the customer. And so right now, one of the privileges we've had is like, let's go win the market, bring as many of the best customers on board tabs, build the best product, and focus on automation margin where we can, knowing that there's certain things that will have to be solved in the next 12 months, but they cannot be infinite. So a lot of my 2026 planning efforts are the things I was not able to accomplish yet in 2025. I can't kick the can on it, but I have much more clarity on what we're going to do in terms of what the teams and what the technology side must address.
Yeah, it's interesting because you like well, at least what I've experienced with tech companies, a linear progression. Like you start off revenue, really no COGS, maybe some hosting costs, and they're super high margins. All right, we start investing, a lot of COGS, margins go down, and now okay, now like you said, it sounds like thinking about the long term and now
Yeah.
optimization. How can we be efficient with delivery of revenue, take care of our customers, but now how can we do it better?
100%. And you have to be thinking about it gradually. not year over year, but quarter over quarter. And you start to progress. And I often put a North Star to where I want to get to in Q2 of next year, Q3. And I want to, but it can't be like you're just going to jump 0 to X in 6 months. You want to see gradual improvements, but also support the scale you need to win the category.
And then a couple more questions before we wrap up. And I think last time, I don't think we talked pricing, but pricing in the CFO space or talking to CFOs, we can get pretty sensitive with pricing based on, is it just pure subscription? Is it usage? Are they taking a cut of invoicing volume? So how are you pricing? Like what is the pricing model with tabs?
Yeah, we're still meeting the CFO where they are today, which is CFOs want certainty. I think they've gotten too burned, especially on the revenue side with usage and hidden fees with payments and things like that kind of get them. And so our ROI is purely based on time savings and ensuring that they get the robustness of a revenue platform that does what they need. The good news is the alternative is already so expensive between services, the modules within NetSuite, some of the other RevRec modules. And so for the most part, we are kind of a flat or product-based, tier-based pricing based on if you have usage or how complex is your NetSuite or what RevRec module you're using. But it's the number one thing is CFOs get certainty at point of sale, and they're not going to have any hidden or usage or crazy implementation costs that catch them later.
Okay, so maybe say subscription, maybe some tiers where it's like there could be usage activity, but it's kind of bounded by tiers, so you know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even
Okay.
not based on revenue scale or usage throughput, it's just based on complexity.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. And then, but Ali, before we wrap up here, favorite number or metric that you're focused on? And I think last time we talked Series A, cash forecasting, big thing. Now at the Series B level, what are some of those North Star top metrics, whether operational or financial, that you focus on?
Yeah, cash forecasting is still number one for me.
Yeah.
As a CEO, the things I've learned about my business, the best type of customers, the ACV type, whether it should be annual upfront versus quarterly, which industry, which persona, and how much I can reinvest into my business. Understanding your cash forecasting at a monthly and quarterly level for a CEO or a founder, even outside of finance, tells you more about your business, what sales is doing, what's happening in implementation and onboarding, what's happening in product, customer success through cash forecasting, because you wake up and you have a plan for the month, you have a certain target that you have committed to collect to hit your operating plan, but then you are responsible at the bottoms up level to see which customers are paying, how are they paying, how painful a monthly can be relative to a juicy upfront. And all of that gets so interesting. And I think anyone who's operating, whether a technology company, even if they have a finance team, should be deeply embedded in their cash forecast. Beyond it, obviously being a really important metric for finance, just as an overall company health and anthropological mission, it is still my favorite metric.
Okay. Yeah. Cash always king. So, and then one last question. I was talking, kind of what's next for the company, but you mentioned 2026 planning. So let's bound this a little bit.
Yeah.
So what's top of mind for 2026? Just things that you're always thinking about, or challenges that you're really, it's just like, hey, what's on your mind for next year?
Yeah. One of the things we talked about earlier is just our objective is to build the best technological team and innovation in all of finance. And we think revenue is one of the most unique places to deploy it. And the reason, and Ben, just bear with me for a second, we are headed to the next phase of AI, which is what I would call the agentic phase of AI, which is a subset of AI, which is starting to give finance teams the tools to deal with more ambiguous and fuzzy situations or workflows within the organization. And the area that typically happens is in accounting, which makes up typically 60 to 70% of finance teams. And then within accounting, the two most fuzziest jobs to be done are billing, because of the ambiguity of what happens from an invoice sent to paid. I need a W-9, I need a PO, I need you to submit this to Coupa, I want to pay partial payment right now, I refute this invoice. And also RevRec, given all of the different rules and variations. And so 2026 is going to be an amazing opportunity for us to continue our mission, but now have finally a turning point in technologies to get to early signs of agentic workflows in finance. And I feel deeply privileged to have both the balance sheet, the partners, the customers, the investors to really kind of seismically move that mission forward in terms of the experiences we can bring to finance teams. And I think it's going to be a moment in my planning, but also just for the buyer out there. As you know, like there's been hundreds of millions, if not billions, poured into CFO and AI products. And I think we're going to, for the first time, see true differentiation where you can just sit in and see a demo from an AP vendor and a revenue automation vendor where you're like, holy moly, that's different than anything I've ever seen before. And that's what's top of my mind is getting both tabs and supporting a market that I think is very excited for that.
And one last question there with agentic AI, because of course a lot of talk around that. And in the back office, because we think accounting, it's very transactional oriented, step by step processes where we want to move from the data from this point to that point to this point, where it's like, well, how much can agentic really do there? Because we just want to push the, like RevRec, right? We've got to invoice. Now we've run our RevRec process. Now we've got to post that to the GL. So how do you see agentic playing a part of the controller's life or CFO life in revenue automation?
Yeah. Crawl, walk, run. I think if anyone pitches you running right now, you should be deeply skeptical. Both your job is way too intimate and important to run, but also the technology will take time to get there. And it's not a Anthropic or OpenAI wrapper. There's some really deep technology that even us, we're up to our first 8 folks that are just focused on ML and AI, not even engineering. And these are mostly researchers and PhDs. This is hard stuff. Like it takes a lot of R&D to build out. And so I think we're going to be heading into a crawl and walk phase over the next 12 months. And so instead of hoping you get the whole world in agentic, you should look for really painful workflows that were never able to be solved in SaaS and see things that can work. So a great example is payment matching or index computation or communication that can handle ambiguous asks like, hey, can I get a PO number and a W-9? That to me is like a crawl and a walk. Over the next 3 to 5 years, an agent can audit a contract and apply a very complex milestone rev rec in a system. We're not there yet. And anyone who tells you otherwise is pitching you baloney.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree in that crawl phase because I see it's like we've got to make this repeatable. We have to know what the system is doing behind the scenes and
Yeah.
not just have a black box there and it produces something we're not sure how it did. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, Ali, really appreciate your time today and catching up with the Series B raise. If listeners would like to learn more about Tabs, where should we send them online?
Yeah, just as of this morning, tabs.com. So s.com. So you don't have to remember .inc or anything else. And so as simple as tabs.com, you can sign up for a demo and you can always email me as well, ali@tabs.com.
I love that because I know last time it was tabs.inc. So now it's just TABS, so tabs.com to learn more. Appreciate your time, sharing your journey from Series A to Series B, an exciting space, and look forward to that next conversation down the road.
Absolutely, Ben. Thank you as always for helping us all move forward in the category. So have a great day.